Hi, I'm Jeff. This is Tropical Plants at 53 degrees north. So today I thought we'd take a look at my ferns. I don't have a great number of ferns, about 6 all in all. They're all tropical ones, none of them are temperate. And I thought I'd show you some of the successes, some of the failures, one or two things about the care needs, and one in particular that I am really looking for and I've been unable to source. So I'll show you what I find so interesting about that one. So let's jump in. And we are in. So we'll start over here in the warm side of my greenhouse. So this side stays to about 18 degrees minimum. It does cost rather a lot to heat it, but I've got it nicely insulated, as you can see. And I have got a video on that if you're interested in knowing all my care tips on, well, it's not really care tips, are they? Greenhouse care tips. All my tips on looking after a greenhouse and keeping it nice and well insulated to keep all that lovely expensive heat in rather than letting it go through the roof. So yeah, we've got a Boston fern here, very common house plant, very popular in Victorian times in the UK, and they used to have them in these great big urns where they could, these lovely fronds could kind of dangle over the side. So what you can see here is a specimen I've had for about 18 months. You can see, if I just kind of show you towards the floor here, because I picked it up quite recently, in fact about half an hour ago. You see all those little brown bits on the floor? Well, that's what's come off it. But it's still it's in a good condition, I think, this one. It certainly looks happy to me. You just naturally kind of get these, they're almost like leaflets on the fronds. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit, you can see. And I quite like the way some of them kind of go bronzy before they fall off. So I certainly wouldn't expect to not get any shedding with this. That's something that I think anybody will have to deal with. But it's a beautiful fern, and I think they look really good when they're hanging. That's something maybe I might want to do at some point, because these, we said the other name is sword fern, because obviously these fronds do look a little bit like a sword, and they can get quite long. I believe they can get up to about 3 foot in length, roughly a metre. So yeah, I've seen them in pictures and on the internet where they are really quite long, hanging down from these big massive hanging baskets in very large greenhouses. So what I've learnt about this one this year is that it really loves the humidity. This is why I've got it in here, because it's right next to the hydrofogger there. We do get a lot of humidity in the UK anyway, but we did have a rather hot spell this year and it absolutely loved it. And this is where a lot of people think ferns, they think dark, shady and moist all the time, and that's not always the case, as you'll see as I go through my rather meagre collection in this greenhouse at the moment. And I'm hoping to get some more, but sourcing them has become a really difficult thing, especially during these COVID times. So this one, the Boston fern, the hotter and steamier the better. This is why a lot of people have them in bathrooms. If you've got a very large bathroom, then I think that would be really nice in there. I have heard and read about the air cleaning properties, and I believe a lot of this idea of ferns cleaning the air came from one study, which has, I believe, been discredited now because it was done in a very, very small space. Apparently that doesn't kind of translate up to a larger space, but you know, whether you believe the air cleaning properties or not, it's still great to have plants in your house. It certainly can't do any harm, can it? I'll definitely worth hedging your bets there and having a go at it. There's nothing like a living thing in the house. I think I love plants in the house. It's just a pity my house is very, very dark and not much will survive in there. So yeah, Boston fern. So what did we say? It's a Nephrolepis exaltata. Really bit of a tongue twister, that one. It took me a few goes at that one. Nephrolepis exaltata. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct. Certainly phonetically it's correct anyway. So hotter the better, hot and steamy. It'll go down to about 10 degrees Celsius. I've got it at a minimum of 18 here, but I'm keeping it in this side of the greenhouse just so that I know it's going to get that humidity. So I'll just kind of zoom in so you can see what's going on a little bit more closely. And it does drop some of these leaves. Again, I kind of neglect it a bit, I have to say. I don't keep it absolutely moist constantly, even though that is one of the requirements to keep it moist. I found that it will go longer than you think if it's in somewhere that's quite highly humid. But of course, yeah, you will get these dry, crispy fronds if you're not watering it enough, and I know I don't. It doesn't want to be waterlogged though. I mean, I've got mine sitting in a tray, as you can see down there, and that could be a problem because I can't really see what's going on under there. And if I water it and it drains through, it could well be sitting in water, which is not something that they like. So that's my Boston fern. I don't think I've actually fed it either, so I am really treating it with neglect, but apparently this is one of the easiest ferns to grow. I picked it up about half an hour ago, and you can see all these brown bits here that look like little leaflets that have come off the fronds there. So yeah, that's a really nice fern. I like that one. So I'll just move you round to my next one and try not to be too jarring with the camera. So this one over here is a division, and if you've not seen that video on how I divided this fern, then please go along and have a look at that. I'll put a card up somewhere, I'm sure. So this is your typical Blue Star Fern. There are various cultivars of the Blue Star Fern. This one is Phlebodium aureum davana, and I've got the mother plant over in the cold side. I just thought I'd try one in the warm and one in the cold. Now Phlebodium will go down to 5 degrees Celsius, so it's not that it has to be kept at this particular temperature. But you can see definitely the younger leaves or the younger fronds on this Phlebodium are really are blue, and this one they kind of crisp up and come quite crunchy. And it seems quite happy over here because I don't know if you can see that on the aureum relates to the golden hairs, I guess, on this creeping rhizome here, and obviously the blue refers to the fronds and the blue that you can see on the rhizome. But you can just see, and I'll see if I can point to it there, you can just see a new growth there coming, and there's another new growth there coming. So that's perfectly happy. I've got it in a clay pot with some bark. It's a very airy mix because, of course, this is an epiphytic fern. All Phlebodiums are epiphytic ferns. They grow up in the trees. So you could actually, and I've been asked this question a number of times, you could actually grow it on a piece of bark, and that's something I do intend having a go of. Or having a go at some point. Phlebodium aureum davana. I'll take you over and show you the mother plant that comes from now. Okay, so this is the mature plant that it came from, and you can see it looks quite different from the baby ones. Oops, just getting my camera stuck on an orchid there. But it's a very substantial plant, and you can also see how the number of lobes on the fronds changes as the leaves age. Again, I've been asked that question a number of times, like how many lobes should it have, especially when people are trying to identify ferns. I mean, there's nothing more difficult than identifying ferns because they can look very similar. So I put it in this big pot after I'd done the division, and you can see, I don't know if you can see there, the rhizome is creeping off there to the right, so it'll sooner fill this pot. It's very happy over here, just as the other division seems to be happy in that side. Those younger leaves there on the left, they're a little bit more blue. So I really like this one. This one is nice because it's a very tactile one, and you can kind of crisp it and crunch it about there. It doesn't want to be in direct sunshine, and this one isn't, and it's not showing any ill effects from the hot weather that we had over the summer, because that one was really quite sheltered. But I've still got it in as bright a light as possible because they grow up in the trees. They're not like an understory plant that will be used to like really dark conditions. They still do want the really bright light, they just don't want that direct sunlight. And just move over to my other Phlebodiums that I've got over here. So this one was labelled as Phlebodium aureum Blue Star Fern, and I must say it's looked better. I'm expecting it to look better as the winter progresses, but you can see how the sun has caught it, because where it is positioned at the moment, if I just kind of zoom off over there, you can see that the sun's just coming through the window there, so it's kind of like in a direct line of sight, as it were, from the sun. Now I do have shading up I had a quite powerful shading cloth up there as well, but it still managed to get through. And you can see the blackened tips of the fronds where the sun has got to it. So I expect this will improve as time goes on. It's still producing new fronds there. You can see this new one here, new little frond coming. And if you look, it's really, really pot bound. I really squeezed it into this pot, and it doesn't mind. Well, that's another little cur tip for you there, because it's epiphytic, it's not really bothered what it's in. I've got this one, I think it's in some kind of like multi-purpose compost. It's hard for me to remember because it's a while since I potted it. I've done a lot of repots since then. But when I water this, practically none of the water is getting down here into the pot. It's all just running off the edge. So it's worth remembering when you are watering any kind of Phlebodium, it's these little hairs on the rhizome that take in the water. So you can literally spray or water the rhizome and it will get what it needs. Phlebodium are one of those unusual ferns that don't really mind being a little bit dry. They're quite happy with that. So long as the atmosphere is fairly humid, then they'll be okay. And again, if we move a little bit further up, this one's looking even more worse for wear because this one is higher up and therefore it's getting more sunshine. And you can see this yellowing frond here is a direct result of the sun. These fronds last about 2 years on most Phlebodiums, so you can say pretty certainly that it's the sun that's caused this. Some worse than others. Again, this one is more in the sun than this one with the spores on it. And I did do a video on the spores, which I have to say I've not followed up on yet. I've not sowed the spores. I've done the first part of it and I've not followed up on it. I might do it at some point if the video gets some more attention. That might give me the motivation to do it. You can see it clearly likes to move this rhizome and spread this rhizome because it's burst the pot there. That one's a little bit easier for me to water, but it's this really hairy golden rhizome that it likes to get the water on. So this one, didn't purchase this one. This one was just growing wild in an orchid pot, and you very often find that. You find that orchids, especially when they come from like the Americas and Asia and places like that, where the orchids are growing in the place where Phlebodiums are growing. I mean, you can imagine all these spores, can't you? They're going to drop into orchids and the surrounding kind of media that an orchid is in. And this is why you get lots of ferns, lots of Phlebodiums growing in orchid pots. So I'm going to give an honourable mention here to an asparagus fern and an asparagus setaceous. Well, one of them is called Asparagus densiflorus and one is this Asparagus setaceous. This is the densiflorus, and before you all jump in the comments, I know it's not a fern. The reason I'm just giving it an honourable mention is because there are lots of people who have this as a house plant and think of it as a fern, and when they're looking up the cur, they'll look up Asparagus fern cur and they'll think that that's the fern and that's what they need to do. So I would just point out that it's not actually a fern despite being called one, and you'll find it has quite different cur needs. So I'm not going to go into that because we're doing ferns here. I just thought I'd mention it. And I just want to come through here to talk about my Asparagus setaceous because I got so sick of it shedding, I just simply cut all the fronds off at the bottom there and left it. As you can see, nothing. It may well die, and you know what, I'm not really bothered because it dropped that much of those little tiny hairs that it just got on my nerves in the end, and I think it just didn't like it here. And no doubt if I zoom in down here, this is where it was. Can you see all those tiny little hairs everywhere? So that came off the Asparagus setaceous. So I'm not really that keen to get a replacement for that one, but I would like a particular fir which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So yeah, quick mention of the asparagus ones which aren't really ferns. So let's get back to the real ferns now. So we're going to have a look at one called Pteris ensiformis, and this has a little bit of a story behind it. So let's just zoom down here. So this one, I'll get it out. This one is Pteris ensiformis. Now, the story behind this one, let's just find the... There we go. Now, no, I thought I'd written on it. I normally write on it the date that I get these things, but I mustn't have been doing it. I've had it quite a while. I've had it a couple of years. This one was in the warm side of the greenhouse, and whatever I did with it, nothing worked. It just didn't like it. It was getting brown leaves, fronds on it, and they kept dropping off. And I tried, because it gets very, very dry very quickly. So I was watering it more and more. I was sitting it in water for an hour just to make sure that it was getting enough water, and nothing worked. Okay, and that was a high humid, fairly high heat environment, like 18 degrees Celsius, but it wasn't in the light. Okay, so then I moved it to over here next to these other ones. So it was over here in a different place. I would say it would get a bit more sunshine there, even though the sun was through shading. It would be brighter, but it did really get some direct sun, even though, like I say, there was shading on there, but I think it was still probably too powerful for it. Didn't like that either, and I moved it down one to the shelf below, which it wouldn't fit on now. Wasn't happy there either, and in the end I thought, right, I'm going to chuck it out, and as is always the case, I put it under there with the intention of throwing it out. What did it do? It started growing and produced some new fronds. So I seem to have found the place for it in the greenhouse. So there's a little lesson there, isn't there, to all of us, that you can think that a particular plant isn't for you, and it could just be that you've just not found the right spot for it. So even though it was totally by accident, I'm quite happy that I found a spot for it, and you can see it's coming back now. It's not as good as it should look, but it's on its way back, and as I say, no doubt over the winter months it will put on more growth for me, because, you know, in a greenhouse especially, it can get up to 35, send up to 36 Celsius in here in the summer, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about that. I can't cool it down from that temperature. You know, that's with full shading on and with hydrofogger on, and me coming in with a hose pipe and damping everything down. It was still well above 30, which is not what it likes. So this is Pteris ensiformis, also known as the silver lace fern, for obvious reasons. I've seen various varieties of this one. Now these fronds here can actually go quite tall. I believe they can get up to 1 metre tall. I expect it would have to be in a bigger pot, and I'm a few years off 1 metre tall yet. Again, this is another one that some say that it will give you healthy, clean air. So again, you can make of that what you like. It likes high humidity. It likes bright filtered light. So this is a terrestrial fern. This isn't one that is up in the trees. So that might be a little hint as to why it did so well right underneath my bench, you know, my bottom shelf of my bench down here. As opposed to being up there on top of the kind of shelving area here. This one will grow in like a peat moss, so something that's loose, that retains a little bit of moisture but is well drained. That was the information that I found out. That I put it in sphagnum peat moss, and it seems to be okay in there. For me, the only issue with this was the position in the greenhouse. So I guess it makes sense if it's used to growing on the forest floor in a cloud forest, then by putting it under here, then it's getting that shade and that shelter that it would normally get. The only issue that I have with it is that I can't really see it very well under there, which is a shame, but that's just the way it is. At least it's happier now. I may well get it out over winter so I can see it a little bit more and see if I can get these fronds opening up a bit more. I see some of them are male and female. Some of them have actually got spores on them already. You can see there just about. Okay, so let's move on to my second to last fern. So this one is Pteris cretica. So it's the same genus as the last one, and you may have seen a video that I did on this quite recently. It's looking much better than it was, but you can still see some signs of damage on some of the older fronds there. I've cut quite a lot of the ones with the black patches off. Not the sun. This was caused by scale insect, and that is one of the main pests of the Pteris genus of ferns. My own fault. I saw the sooty mould on it and I just assumed it was the humidity that was causing it, and by the time I actually investigated more closely, it was too late. It was absolutely covered, and I mean covered, in scale insect. So quite easy to solve. The sooty mould is easy enough to, well, I won't go into the details because it's all in that video, but it has recovered now, and it is producing on here some nice spores for me on there, and some lovely new fronds. And again, it's another one that's really quite tolerant. It's a similar position really as the last one, the Pteris ensiformis. However, this one does seem to be able to cope with a little bit more bright light than the last one did. Again, it doesn't really like the sunshine that much, but where I've got it, it does seem to be okay with the level of sunlight and the level of shading that it's getting. Again, it's another one to grow in some kind of peat-based compost, another one to feed, which I haven't done. Again, most of my ferns, I kind of neglect them, but they tootle along quite nicely anyway. It gets very dry very quickly, this one. It doesn't show you any signs of distress at getting dry, so it's worth, you pick it up, and I'm like sometimes amazed at how light it is because I've not watered it for a while. But having said that, on the days I remember to water it, like if I watered it every day in a week, it wouldn't show me any signs of being overwatered either. It does like to be moist, but it'll forgive you if you forget occasionally. So that's Pteris cretica. Okay, and we come to my last fern. I beg your pardon, I've got a couple more. A couple to quickly mention. I forgot about these because I don't normally think of them as, not that I don't think of them as ferns, I don't think of them as tropical ferns, but actually they must be. They don't shed any of these fronds. They are evergreen ferns, they're not deciduous. They look very similar, although I don't know if they are the same. You can just see the sooty mould on those because it was underneath this Pteris cretica. It's not got any pests on it as far as I know. Both of them were found growing in pots of orchids, and I've just simply taken them out and potted them up. So I really only keep them here as I think it looks quite nice. If I just kind of step back, I think that looks quite nice to see, especially with that one in the background there. It just gives you that little bit of jungly, frothy, feathery feel there, rather than looking at the dirty old shelving that I've got things on there. So I do like them. They're nice. I don't know what they're called. I've no idea. I'm guessing they're tropical. They're certainly not bracken-like. I know in the UK we have a lot of bracken, and those sort of ferns, a lot of the ferns in the UK actually lose the leaves, or the fronds go browner over the winter months. These don't. These stay like this all year round. They stayed like this all the way through last winter. I mean, of course, I've got the temperature in here to about 12 degrees. But if anybody knows what they're called, let me know. I'd love to know. As I say, Fern ID isn't the easiest thing. Maybe there's an app for it. I don't know. Again, jump in the comments if you know that. And I'll take you over to my prized possession in the fern kingdom. So this, I absolutely love this. As a fern, I mean, I don't think it comes much nicer than this. So this one is, again, it has several names, and it looks like I actually shine the leaves, which I don't. This one is Pteris quadriaurita, sometimes called tricolour fern for obvious reasons. Sometimes when the new fronds come, they look very red. Sometimes they look quite bronzy. Sometimes they look like they've been painted with gold. It's just such a lovely thing. It is sold as a house plant very often, and I think you couldn't really ask for more in a fern. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous fern. So yes, likes high humidity. It's very similar to the last couple of ferns that I showed you. Sometimes it's called the painted brake fern. It likes a peaty compost, doesn't want to go below about 10 degrees. So that's my prized possession in my tropical ferns. The last one I want to show you is going to be a picture that I'm going to stick up on the screen. And this one is called, it's actually a maidenhair fern, and it's called Adiantum Macrophyllum or Macrophyllum. And I've no idea where I got this from, the name from. I think somebody mentioned it as a really nice fern to have. I've seen them for sale in the States for about $10, and I just love the colours. It's like a large leaved maidenhair fern. I don't have any maidenhair ferns at the moment, but if I did, that's the one that I'd want. I've tried eBay. I've even got like a saved search set up on eBay to alert me if anybody starts to sell them. But for whatever reason, even though we have fern specialists in the UK, I've not been able to find one of these Adiantum Macrophyllum or Macrophyllum. So if maybe you are attached or affiliated with a fern society, or you know where I could get hold of a piece of rhizome or spore or anything that will get me this fern, I'll probably be really disappointed when I get it, won't I? Like I say, they're only selling them for $10 in the States, but for whatever reason I can't get them. So if you do know, and stick it in the comments, I would love to hear from you. So that's my meagre fern collection. I'll leave you on this glorious tricolour fern, this Pteris quadriaurita, and I hope you enjoyed this slightly different video on my fern collection, and that's it for now. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.